In My Hero Academia, we haven't really seen that much from heroes outside Japan, so in today's video we're going to discuss the #1 ranked hero in the USA, Captain Celebrity. Now this guy made his first appearance in the Vigilantes spin-off manga, and whereas All Might kinda reminds you of Superman, Captain Celebrity is much more reminiscent of this guy, at least when we first meet him. When the series progresses, you do actually realize he's a good dude, but before we get into it, I should warn you that this video will have spoilers for Vigilantes, but the main focus of this video is about his quirk, his personal life, and his character growth, as well as why he came to Japan in the first place. So we're going to be discussing those 4 things, and so any spoilers are directly related to that. And with that said, let's get into it. So Captain Celebrity's real name is Christopher Skyline, which is exactly the kind of Mission Impossible sounding last name you'd expect from America's top dog. Now in most situations people simply refer to him as Cece, which is what I'll be doing for the rest of the video as it's just way easier. Cece's quirk is simply known as flight, but that name alone doesn't do it justice. At a basic level, it gives him the ability to fly around at high speeds, as he's demonstrated on many occasions, and following his first appearance in chapter 14 of Vigilantes, it wasn't until chapter 46 that we found out the secondary ability of his quirk. As it says here, this secret ability is kept out of public knowledge so that people can't figure out his weaknesses. Essentially, it gives him an invisible barrier that wraps around his whole body and protects him from physical harm and also the temperature outside, which is why he was able to wear a skin-tight sleeveless bodysuit during Christmas time. As he explains here, the field of protection can be extended to cover other people, but the more people he protects with it, the thinner it becomes for him. This was demonstrated when he swooped in to save the 3 little sisters from this explosion here, and unlike his usual invincible self, this time he actually suffered a lot of blowback. However, this particular incident displayed his genuine heroism and made him more popular than ever, with the video getting over 100 million views online, with some commentators even comparing him to All Might. Too far guys, too far. The last thing to mention about his quirk is his incredible super strength. Now it's never been explicitly stated that this is the result of his flight quirk, but just to list a few of his accomplishments, he defeated what appears to be Godzilla's long lost cousin by punching him in the face. He also lifted up a cruise ship, and for a time, he was able to prevent the Tokyo Sky Egg from falling with his bare hands, whilst being slammed into by these kamikaze bombers, which are basically like prototype Nomus that self-destruct. And to put this even more into perspective, the Tokyo Sky Egg holds about 50,000 people, so you can imagine just how heavy it is to support that thing with just your 2 human arms. While his flight quirk assists him in all these activities, the strength that he's putting on display is pretty unnatural, so either he's been drinking a lot of protein shakes or his quirk gives him more power. Let me know which one you guys think it is in the comments below, but I'm pretty sure it's his quirk. Now moving on to his early years, Cece was incredibly popular in high school, so much so that he even had his own fan club. Tell me one student in the current series popular enough to get their own fan club at school. With the exception of this guy, I reckon you'd have a pretty hard time finding one. However, while Cece was adored by his peers, there was one person who pretty much refused to give him the attention that he was so used to, and that was another student called Pam. Throughout their first interaction, she scowled at him, punched him in the face, made fun of his trademark smile, and equated him to a balloon, meaning that she thought he was hollow inside. Super harsh stuff, but as Cece says, it's just in his personality that he wants everyone to like him, and he was always especially popular with girls, so the fact that there was a girl who wasn't interested in him really fascinated him, and over a period of time, he was very persistent in trying to get her attention. As we can see in these panels, he was chasing her up until he became a pro hero. Like, that is some serious commitment, at least a few years. Now Pam is someone who doesn't really think much of other people and generally doesn't like to show her true emotions, but eventually he was able to win her over, and as we see here, they got married at quite a young age. But before we move on to what else happened in his personal life, let's briefly talk about his early hero career, and more specifically how old he is now. So in this panel, it was stated by President Mike that Cece had been top 10 material for 10 years running, ever since his debut. Now assuming that the US has a similar hero system to Japan, in that heroes get their provisional licenses whilst they're in high school and then get their full licenses around the age of 18, this would make Cece roughly 28 years old when we first meet him in the Vigilantes manga. And because this part of Vigilantes is about 5 or 6 years before we meet Deku in the main series, Cece is probably around 33 to 34 in the present day, so very close in age to Gentle Criminal, who is somehow only 32. This guy why does he look so old? The fact he was considered top 10 material ever since his debut puts him in the same bracket as characters like Hawks and Endeavor, who were both top 10 heroes at very young ages. And whilst he was climbing up the American hero rankings, he was having various troubles at home. To start with, he says that he always ended up making his wife mad, and this makes perfect sense because I'm sure for those of you who have read Vigilantes, you can tell this guy constantly says inappropriate things that are interpreted in different ways to what he actually means. We see this on countless occasions, with one especially terrible example being when he referred to another woman as a goddess when his wife was standing literally right there. But he wasn't actually being flirtatious, he was talking from a professional point of view. Another problem he had was that he was being taken advantage of by people he considered his friends, as it's implied that they sold stories about him to the newspapers. And on top of all of that, this one is probably the most bizarre, but he was actually sued by some of the villains that he had taken down. I don't exactly know who's making the laws in America that allowed that to happen, but yeah, pretty weird stuff. Could you just imagine how many times All Might would be sued if they actually allowed things like this in Japan? Because of all these incidents, coupled with the fact that he went on to have numerous encounters with women other than his wife, he began to be referred to as Captain Catastrophe Celebrity. Most of his legal troubles had to do with women, and when he makes his debut in Vigilantes, it's stated that Pam is seeking reparations for all his cheating. This brings us to the reason why he finds himself in Japan in the first place. So Cece had his hero license revoked in certain states due to the mountains of lawsuits against him, and so he went to Tokyo to make a living there instead. His first appearance saw him save Koichi's life as he was about to be splattered by an oncoming truck. Now Koichi is the main character in the Vigilantes manga, by the way, and following this, Cece was horrified to know that Koichi didn't know who he was, then going on to sign his All Might hoodie, much to Koichi's disgust, as his level of admiration for All Might would rival even Deku or Nightai. Cece made his next appearance by taking down this Godzilla creature, but what made this moment especially hilarious was the fact that he refused to start helping before the media had fully set up so that they could capture his heroics, and also because he wasn't legally obligated to help until the police sent a formal request. There's no way you can convince me that that's not something Homelander would say. In that same fiasco, he also saved Koichi from being crushed by a falling rock, but again, it's interesting to note that when presented with two civilians to save from a collapsing building, he opted for the woman, despite the fact that his super strength would have been more suited to saving the sumo wrestler, rather than leaving it to Koichi and his spaghetti arms. Now, one of the many reasons why I love Cece as a character is due to his epic growth throughout the series. He was introduced to us as arrogant, reckless, overly flirtatious, and someone who's just not in it for the right reasons. One example was when he went to a restaurant with Makato, and when she told him of a bank robbery that was going down, his exact reply was, "Who cares about that? All that matters is our time together." I mean, I guess it's romantic, but you wouldn't catch a true hero saying that. However, in this situation, he did eventually sort out the whole robbery thing after realizing that Makato and Pam were in contact, and that if he was to cheat again whilst in Japan, his wife would use it as evidence in her many lawsuits against him. This then led to him picking Koichi up off the street and pretending as if he was entertaining a couple of fans, rather than going on what he thought was a date. Under Makato's leadership as his manager, Cece was incredibly busy during his time in Japan, consistently booking him appearances, photo shoots, interviews, in addition to his hero work. Basically, he had no time to do anything else except his job, and he built up a lot of good connections, including with fellow heroes like Ingenium. And look, he even got All Might wearing his merch. His relationship with Koichi mainly consisted of saving his life on numerous occasions, something which he actually made a point to say that he was tired of doing. However, by the end of his arc in this series, he was willing to sacrifice his own life just so that Koichi would live, and he used what was left of his barrier to shield Koichi and save him from a fall. Luckily, All Might showed up and saved them both, as well as 50,000 other people, and I'm sure Vigilantes readers would agree with me when I say that this was one of the best displays of All Might's speed that we've seen. But going back to Cece, he didn't really go after any girls during his stay in Japan, and he became a legit selfless hero. Eventually, he was able to go back to the US, as his hero license was restored in all the states, because many of the lawsuits against him actually amounted to entrapment of some kind, so it's likely that he was set up on more than one occasion. It also turned out that Pam was pregnant before he left to go to Japan, and had decided to raise the baby on her own until Cece was in the right place to raise a child. And as it turns out, by the end of his stay in Japan, he was more than worthy of fulfilling that role, as he and Pam got back together. Happy days! And that, my friends, is Captain Celebrity explained. As you can see, he's actually a pretty cool character, and although far from perfect, he's clearly tried hard to be a better person. He's yet to make an appearance in the main series, but if Deku and the gang ever visit America, whether that be for a potential third movie, or maybe just an arc in the manga, then it'd be great to see what Cece is up to in the present day. especially as his son would now be at the age where he's manifesting his quirk. Now, that could be interesting. Make sure you sub to the channel, and if you're interested, I did a review of the first arc of Vigilantes, which will hopefully ease you into the series. Not sure when I'm going to do a follow-up to that, but I will say that there's a Vigilantes list video that is not too many weeks away. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace out.